Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another study of the Torah portion. Today we study the portion of Yitro. Yitro was the father-in-law of Moshe Rabbeinu, and one of the highlights of this week's Torah portion is the giving of the Torah, the Ten Commandments that was given to the Jewish people directly without an intermediary. Hashem came down on Mount Sinai and spoke to the Jewish people. How did this procedure take place? The giving of the Torah is the topic of our discussion. I'm reading from Selection of Lekutei Sichot, the second top. It's a very long one. The rabbi is bringing two arguments between two major sages, and the Rebbe is the only one in our time that is able to combine the reasoning that will explain both arguments, which are seemingly on different topics, but yet when we understand the source of their soul, so to say, it explains why each one is sides with a different opinion.
Ivan 274.
We begin. The Torah introduces the Ten Commandments by stating, if you read the sixth aliyah of this week's portion, you read about God giving the Ten Commandments. But before, there is one verse before the beginning. It says, God spoke all these words, Leimor. Vaidaber Elokim et kol advarim haele Leimor. What does Leimor means is the big issue. Generally, the word Leimor is interpreted to mean to tell someone else. Leimor is Vayomer. Vayomer is spoke. Leimor, to teach. As in the many verses that state, God spoke to Moshe, Leimor, that is, God spoke to Moshe with the intent that Moshe relate his words to the Jewish people. So every time you say the word Leimor, meaning I tell you something, but don't keep it to yourself, tell it to somebody else. However, in this instance, Leimor must be interpreted differently because God spoke to the entire Jewish people at the giving of the Torah. Last week we talked about similar situation of Leimor, right? Now we're going to talk about another one. When God spoke, Vaidaber Elokim et kol advarim haele Leimor, God spoke all these words to say to who? He spoke to the entire Jewish people. Therefore, indeed, here the entire Jewish people refers to all the Jewish souls, including those yet to be born in all future generations. All were present to receive the Torah, and all heard the Ten Commandments from God himself. To whom then were the Jews or Moshe intended to convey the Ten Commandments? The rabbi is asking, the Talmud tells us that when God spoke the Ten Commandments, he made sure that the entire Jewish people, or the entire Jewish people includes all future generations of children or converts. Anyone who is going to make it to be part of the Jewish people had to be there to accept and make the marriage between him and that soul and God. And therefore there is nobody left to teach. So you can say maybe Leimor to your children, which is very difficult to fit because it should say to tell your children, as usually it says, therefore the question is, what does Leimor means? For who? For this reason, the Mechilta explains, Mechilta is one of the earliest Medrashim, explains on this verse, that here the word Leimor means to reply. Leimor means speak back to me. So when God spoke these words, Leimor, demanding that the listeners, the Jewish people, reply back. In response to every commandment, the Jews replied that they would carry out what is required of them. Therefore, we learn from it, based on the Mechilta, that every time God gave a commandment, the Jewish people had to reply, to say, okay, we will do it, whatever, we're going to see what they said. So Leimor is not to tell anyone else not listening, but Leimor is to say back, to respond back. The Mechilta relates a difference of opinion regarding the way the Jews express their acceptance of the Ten Commandments. Now we have an argument between two rabbis Had they fulfilled the commandment of Lamor to answer back to Hashem? Rabbi Ishmael states that they answered yes to the positive commandments and no to the negative ones. So God says, honor your father and mother? Yes. Keep the Shabbat? Yes. Don't steal? No. Don't kill? No. So they said yes to a positive and they said no to a negative.
You can say yes to a negative also by saying, yes, I agree. Don't kill, yes.
Okay, that's your opinion. That's not Rabbi Ishmael.
Okay.
Rabbi Ishmael says they said yes to a positive precept and a no to a negative. When they say no, they won't misbehave. So obviously they all accepted the 10 commandments. But the way they accepted according to Rabbi Ishmael varies between positive or negative. Okay? By saying yes to the commandments that involve their taking action, they implied that they would do what was asked of them. And by responding no to the commandments that involves their refraining from action, they promised that they would not do what God forbid. So when they said, no, we will not steal, no, we will not murder, no, we will not covet, and then they said, yes, we will keep the Shabbat. Yes, we will honor our father and mother. Yes, God is our Lord.
But they only got the first, what, 4?
The
Correct.
first two.
First 2, and then they said, we can't.
No, they said we can't listen,
Right.
but they heard that from Moshe, and therefore they responded in the way.
For the last 8, they're responding to Moshe, who's been told them.
Right. And by the way, according to the Midrash, within the first 2 are included all 10, but we won't get to that far. Rabbi Akiva, by contrast, maintains that they answered yes to all commandments, saying yes to the positive commandments and yes to the negative commandments. Don't steal, yes. Don't kill, yes. Honor thy father and mother, yes. I'm your God, yes. Don't worship any other God, yes.
Then you say amen?
Yes means like amen.
They said amen.
Huh? Yes is not amen. These are 2
I
separate
know, but
words.
what word do you use?
Yes.
The word,
Ken.
no, he can.
Hen.
Hey, none.
Yes.
Okay.
Hen and love. Hen and love. This reply signified their willingness to fulfill each of God's commands as required, doing that which was mandated and refraining from that which was forbidden. Says the Rabbi, so you have 2 opinions. Rabbi Ishmael says they said yes to positive, they said no to negative. Rabbi Akiva is of the opinion they said yes all the time to every one of the commandments. The reason for the difference of opinion between the sages calls for explanation. What difference does it make whether the Jews answered in the negative, that they would not violate the prohibition, or in the positive, affirming that they would carry out God's command and not do what is prohibited? Similarly, the intent of both answers is the same. They express their readiness to obey all of God's commandments, both positive and negative. Ask the Rebbe, I don't understand, what's the difference? What the answer was is to say that they are willing to obey God's instructions, right? So what's the difference if they said yes or they said no? The intent is what counts. When God says don't steal, and according to one they said yes, meaning they won't steal. According to another, no, we won't steal. It's the same. Why is there an argument? It seems that they are looking to argue about every small thing.
Also, God reads man's thoughts. So they didn't have to say anything. They could just say in their minds, I agree, I won't.
That's not enough, because it's not about God, it's about the Jewish people. They needed to verbalize, to be held against about their word. So it's not about what God knows. They needed to make that bond with God. They need. By the way, anybody knows that in marriage, a Jewish wedding reflects the giving of the Torah. Anybody knows?
So
We circle the bride circles 7 times. The Jewish people circled around Mount Sinai 7 times. We have 7 days because the Jewish people prepare themselves for 7 days. It's in today's Torah portion. Also, part of the reason is the Jewish people had to say yes. And part of the saying yes, meaning that there cannot be force. And part of the saying yes is that the bride must accept, but agree to the marriage. So the question is, the way they accepted the Ten Commandments varies between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva. According to Rabbi Shmuel, they said yes to positive, no to a negative. According to Rabbi Akiva, they always said yes. What's the difference? There is another difference of opinion between the two sages. Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiva regarding the giving of the Torah. On the same topic of giving of the Torah, there is another debate between those two rabbis. All the people saw the sounds and the flames. Reading the text, it says right after the giving of Torah, V'chol ha'am, the entire people, ro'im et hakolot ve'et halapidim. They see the call is sound, lapid is flames, a torch. All the people saw the sound and the torches.
They actually saw it.
Saw the sounds and the flame. Saw the sounds you hear, you don't see. Rabbi Ishmael states that the people saw what is usually seen and heard that which was usually heard. In his reading, the verb saw does not apply to the object of sounds, which immediately followed it, but only to the flames. The second object of the verb is in the verse. The second object in the verse. He maintains that the sounds, something that is usually heard, were heard and not seen. That's Rabbi Ishmael. It says, V'chol ha'am, the entire people ro'im, they see et hakolot, the sound and the flames. Rabbi Ishmael said, no. They saw that what you're supposed to see. Like what? The flames. And they heard that was you're supposed to hear. What is sound? That's Rabbi Ishmael. So the order in the text where you read about sound and flames is not in order. It should have said flames and sounds because they saw the sound and they heard the flames. I'm sorry. They saw the flames and they heard the sound. The Torah says first sound, it should have reversed. Anybody didn't follow, don't follow? You understand. Rabbi Akiva, however, he disagrees with Rabbi Ishmael's body, maintains that the verb's direct object is also its semantic object, exactly the way it is written, according to his understanding. The giving of the Torah brought about an upheaval within the natural order. When God came down to the universe, he changed nature. He mixed up the laws of nature. The people saw what is usually heard and heard what is usually seen. God mixed it up, turned it over. Sounds that are by nature heard were seen, and flames which are seen were heard. Rabbi Akiva says, no. They saw the sound. They heard the flames. In other words, usually sound goes through your ear, sound came through their eyes. Usually flames you see through your eyes, they heard flames. How is it possible? We don't have the tools to explain that because our bodies are limited and the ears can hear only certain things and the eye can see something. But when God came down Mount Sinai, he mixed the things. That's why the order is in other words, Rabbi Ishmael, he's expounds the text based on the content, not the literal words. Rabbi Akiva was looking at the words and says the way it's written means to teach us something, and therefore, because they saw the sounds is written, it must be they saw that is what usually you hear, and they heard that which you usually see. Any questions so far? I should say there is today a whole different industry about seen sounds. Anybody heard about that? No? About hearing flames, so that was you're seeing. There are devices, it's a scanner that can scan your halo and tell you if you have a positive halo or negative, literally. a light. If it's yellow or red, it's very positive. If it's a blue or green, it's very negative. Sometimes when people walk in the room and we don't feel comfortable, it's a halo. We don't sense it with our eyes, we don't see it, but our body, we have some other senses that can hear. They made a study about plants. A man stood, it's all recorded on video. A man started new plants, identical in the two sides of the room, or two rooms next to each other. Same amount of light, of sunlight, same amount of water. But to one, every day you would go and curse, say, I hate you, you're taking space, you are of no good. And the other one says, it's such a blessing, it's so beautiful to see you. One was, I have photos, one flourishes and grew 3 times the size of the other one. They hear what we don't know. Then they were able to see, to record sounds. A man came, was about to chop part of a small plant, and there is a scanner that was able to scan sounds that the plant was making to other limbs to be worried because they're going to be chopped. I have a book that it was done in the middle of the 90s. In other words, today, that you can, when I speak words, there are words that are written up in that shape, in the shape of the words that, or the letters that I use. Anyway, when I discovered that I started this came to mind when Rabbi Akiva said that when God came, according to Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Ishmael, it's all natural. And therefore the content has to be explained. So the Torah misorganized the order, but it doesn't mean no miracles. According to Rabbi Akiva, there was a great miracle. God mixed up the natural rules, and therefore the ear can see and the eye can hear.
Question, Rabbi. So when someone comes and you actually see the number in a certain order, is that something that you're
Same thing, you train your brains to see based on the sound, correct? But you don't see physical objects. There, a scanner today can show you physical objects. The halo, it can show you the paint, the color. What they saw over there, back to our discussion here, they saw the sound. The sound came as like you see a color or a window. There is a well-known general principle. In the Torah, we have a law. The Holy One, blessed be He, does not work miracles without a purpose. When God created a system, that system is called, nature. God will not break nature just to show off. If there is a miracle, it was for a purpose. Therefore, as the Rebbe, accordingly, it is necessary to say that the miracle of seeing what is usually heard and hearing that what is usually seen, as described by Rabbi Akiva, was not a superfluous happening that accompanied the giving of the Torah. Were that to be true, it would have been a purposeless miracle. Instead, it was an integral part of that revelation. The giving of the Torah elevated the Jews to the loftiest spiritual levels, according to Rabbi Akiva. As a result of this sublime ascent, they saw that is what is usually heard, and they heard that what is usually seen. So there is no just for a show. Therefore, when God came down, He elevated Jews to such a high level that it's reflected by the fact that nature have reversed itself.
Well, actually,
Therefore, we need to understand that. Yes.
I think the whole idea of living in the desert for 40 years is full of miracles all the time.
Correct. But it was a purpose.
Yes.
To punish the golden calves worshippers and to raise a new generation that is free of slavery.
Yeah, but even after that happened, and for the last 38 years, you had the man, you had...
It was great miracles, but
Yes.
they all were for a purpose. That's all I'm saying. The purpose is to be able to raise a new generation that did not have the past. A similar statement must be made according to Rabbi Ishmael's approach. Since the verse is describing the backdrop of the giving of the Torah, it points out that one of the results of the extremely lofty state brought about by the giving of the Torah was that the Jews saw what is usually seen and heard what is usually heard. The implication is that this means of perception was granted to the Jews as part of the revelation of Mount Sinai. This is problematic because similarly, that is nothing extraordinary. On the contrary, this is a natural pattern. So the rabbi is asking, according to Rabbi Ishmael, we need to understand, why is the Torah describing what happened, that they saw and they heard what was to be here? It's naturally, everybody can hear, everybody can see, healthy people. So according to Rabbi Akiva, there was a miracle. Why is the miracle? According to Rabbi Ishmael, it was no miracle, it's a natural, ordinary. Why does it say v'chol ha'am ro'im et hakolot ve'et halapidim? Why does it say that they saw the sound, they saw the flames and they heard the sound? Obviously, that's what happened. There's nothing new. So we have two arguments about either they said yes, 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 or they said yes, no, no, yes, yes, no, no. And the other one, his natural was a miracle where they saw what you hear and they heard what you see, or they saw everything natural. And we need to understand the reason. Says the Rebbe, since these two differences of opinions feature the same sages and concern the same subject, it's about the giving of the Torah, and it's about the same people, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Ishmael. It is logical to assume that they were interdependent, and the sages each follow a distinct pattern of thought in both instances. We need to understand beneath the surface, what's the reasoning behind them, behind their opinions, and that will explain both sides of their arguments. The approach that the Jews saw what is usually seen and heard what is usually heard leads to the understanding that the Jews answered yes to the positive commandments and no to the negative ones. Conversely, the approach that the Jews saw what is usually heard and heard what is usually seen leads to the understanding that they answered yes to both the positive and negative commandments. If you understand the way they explain about the sound and the flames, it will explain your argument, their opinions about yes, 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 or yes, no, no, yes. Did you understand that? Can we move on? I'm not going to go into Rashi because this is already a third deeper much level. We are going down to number 4. It is possible to further clarify the above by explaining two fundamental differences between the senses of sight and hearing. Says the Rebbe, let's go and start understand what's the difference between hearing and seeing. By the way, if I had to ask you without looking in the book, which is a greater sense, seeing or hearing? Seeing, why?
Because it allows you to walk normally. You could comprehend more by seeing.
You can comprehend more by seeing.
You can also read what's being,
Yeah.
because you can read by seeing, you can read.
You can read.
You can see the physical, but not the spiritual.
What do you say?
You can see the physical better, but the spiritual is hearing.
And yet,
So which one is greater?
It's
Hearing.
easy because Moses said, "Let me see you." Not it's been heard about.
Sometimes you say, I hear you.
Yeah,
Also,
but
I
he
understand you.
couldn't hear him, but he wanted to see him actually.
the Amish psychologists that say hearing is better than seeing.
Who says,
Psychologists have read
psychologist said that hearing is better than seeing? Why?
because you can get around without seeing. If you hear, then you can talk and send speech.
So
patterns.
communication is much more important. Okay, yes?
Everybody said, you can hear, you can speak. If a person is deaf, you cannot speak.
So someone who cannot hear is unable to communicate with his surrounding, but when you see, you can, but if you cannot see, but you can hear, at least you can communicate with people.
People learn to speak when they can't hear.
Huh?
People learn to speak that can't hear.
Of course, through a
No,
sign
they-
language.
No, they learn to speak.
Sign language.
So if you can't hear, you can speak. Yeah, those are.
There is a
becomes
sign
another-
language.
Yeah.
I am just going to share with you the rabbi to save time, what the rabbi thinks. Here it is. Says the Rebbe, the first difference relates to the person seeing or hearing. Sight makes a deeper impression on the soul of the one who sees, and as a result, inspire greater certainty than hearing. As the rabbi explained, no intellectual argument can ever convince a person who has seen something else with his eyes. Sight clarifies a matter and causes it to be imprinted on the soul with greater depth and certainty than one could do with his mind. This concept is reflected in the halachic ruling that is applied in day-to-day legal practice. A witness may not serve as a judge. Anybody heard that? The Rebbe says seeing is far, far greater than hearing. One reason, I don't negate, I do not discredit what was said here, but this is the Rebbe's and the Torah. When I see something, you can talk to me all day long, you will not change my mind. Huh? If I see you walking through the door, you can say whatever you want. But if you told me you entered, someone can convince me that you've never been here. Yes.
Also, when somebody's like sins, there has to be two witnesses, eyewitnesses.
Eyewitnesses,
not,
right.
eyewitnesses.
Well, because hearing is subjective. No, this is not the same. This is not a good point. No. Thank you for the try, but no, it's not. Yes.
What about the Muna hearing? Will have a deeper imprint.
That
on
was the
faith.
10 Commandments. We're going to get there. Just a minute. You're going to Muna. I don't want to talk about it because we're going to talk about it. I believe that's what the Rebbe is going to talk about.
Okay,
That's the idea of their arguments. Just a minute. The difference between hearing and seeing.
okay.
We have an argument whether they saw that what you hear or they heard what you see or no, all is natural. And we have some problems with it. One, why according to Rabbi Akiva God made miracle? B, according to Rabbi Ishmael, why the Torah mentions it? It's a natural behavior if there was no miracle. So we're going to get, but the difference between hearing and seeing is seen imprints deeper in the soul to such a degree that it cannot be erased. Hearing, on the other hand, no matter how much you hear about it, you hear the song or you hear the words a million times, a year later, or somebody can change your mind, make it change your mind. The rule is that a judge who witnessed a crash, witnessed a crime, witnessed any part cannot serve as a judge in that case. Why? Because he is impaired. When you hear, you have two witnesses say one way, you have two witnesses say something else, a professional say that, an expert say this, the litigant says that, the defendant says this, you have differences of opinion, the judge need to come to an agreement based on his common sense, based on the evidence presented before him, or if there's no evidence. But if he saw something, he will never be able to make his mind any different. And therefore he cannot serve as a judge. Hearing does not leave that deep an imprint on the soul. Certainly intellectual understanding, also referred to with the analogy of hearing, as in the Yiddish term, der Herrn, does not have the same power to bring about the same certainty as sight. Do we have we need to discuss it any further? No. Hearing is not as deep in the soul, an imprint, an engravement as seen. When you see, it's stuck. When you hear, it's shaky. Says the
That's
Rebbe.
a way of seeing the actual thing happen.
Right.
Like
Vision, sight.
vision, sight. If somebody walks in the room, you've seen them walk in the room.
That's
But if I show you a movie of somebody walking in the room, that's not good.
because we know there are props and we
Exactly.
know that it
Right.
can all be
So
Photoshopped.
it's gotta be real, sir. Okay.
Right.
Here,
The day you have AI
yeah,
and the
and
day you
that's-
have the, whatever they call it,
For a while. Hasn't been
what
real.
you have that real people looks
Right.
like real people. So it's, we need to discuss it, but sight is
Yeah.
far deeper than hearing.
Yeah.
So if I offer you to go to the orchestra or to go to a movie, where would you rather go?
Depends on the orchestra. Yeah.
Depends what they're-
Because in the orchestra, you see them.
Right.
If I let you listen to the orchestra or watch a movie on television, which one would you prefer? Huh? Watch. Why? Because
they're
it's
thinking-
much,
More entertaining.
it's more entertaining deeper to the soul.
So Rabbi, so
He doesn't
Not to
listen to
delay.
live music.
how do you explain
Yeah, watch it.
10 people seeing the same thing and have 10 different
I
perspectives.
understand, right. Because their brains interpreted the vision differently. but they all saw the same thing.
Japanese film.
You have there is experts, I think we did it in JLI, experts, policemen who are trained to pay attention to details, and they were asked, there were 3-4 policemen, what color shirt the victim wore. One says green, the other says red, and they asked him, how do you know? He said, I saw. He saw red shirt, the other one saw green shirt. Because at time of desperate or at a serious time, an emergency, people pay attention to different parts and they do not focus on the details. People testify, witness testify that he held a knife and turned out that he held a fork. There is a video that shows that he held a fork. How is it possible? That's what they imagine. The person that attacked was holding a knife, was not holding a knife, was holding a fork. But the idea in general speaking between hearing and seeing is that seeing is much, much deeper in the soul. B, the second difference relates to the object seen or heard. Sight focuses on a material entity. One sees its physical substance. By contrast, it is impossible to hear a physical entity. Hearing responds to sound waves that are spiritual, that is, not tangible when compared to something that is seen. How much more so does this apply regarding understanding, the ability to grasp abstract concepts? Now we see a difference between hearing and seeing. When you see, what can you see? Only a physical object. Can you see the wind? You can see the wind. Can you see your opinion? Can I see your opinion? We borrow the term, but there is no such thing. I cannot see your idea. I cannot see your common sense or what you say. But hearing catches a spiritual object. Here, I hear the sound waves. You can see them. They're not physical. I hear your opinion. I understand very well. Understanding is also in the category of hearing. So if I learn and I understand, I grasp what the message is, or how to explain, how to build this subject, how to fix the problem, I understand it because it's not tangible, but it's more spiritual. So hearing is a more spiritual sense than seeing. These two differences between sight and hearing are interdependent. Since a human being is a physical entity, it is natural for him through sight to absorb and grasp another material entity in a closer and deeper way than a spiritual entity. But human beings are not capable of absorbing something spiritual thoroughly. Therefore, it is through hearing and through his mind that he absorbs the spiritual, which is further removed from his being. The Rebbe says they are interconnected. Seeing, our body is a physical body. So I can catch physical objects and connect with them far deeper than I can connect with spiritual objects. Because seeing is all about the physical world, therefore my body grasps it much deeper than the hearing as the first point. Because hearing connects with spirituality, therefore it's a much weaker connection. It can be broken and untie the connection. If I heard your opinion, or I heard from you that you have been in the yard and someone else changed my mind, or someone has convinced me that you lied to me, I'll change my mind because it's a spiritual connection. Because since it's a spiritual connection, it can easily be shattered, broken, because my body is a physical body, and therefore the bond with spirituality is a very shaky one. When it comes to sin, sin is a physical object. Because the body is physical, therefore the connection is a far stronger. Is there any question to that? No question? Says the Rebbe. This represents one of the innovations that the giving of the Torah brought about. It generated the potential to see what is usually heard and hear what is usually seen. What is usually heard, the spiritual and the godly, intangible, that can't be seen and can be appreciated only through hearing. was able to be seen, accepted by the Jewish people with the certainty and concrete perception engendered by sight. They saw godliness. Did you understand? Now we can understand the differences of opinion. When God came down on Mount Sinai, the connection he made with the Jewish people was so powerful that they were able to connect even to spiritual entity just like they connect ordinarily to a physical entity, because they were elevated to such a state that their body became secondary to the soul. The soul overpowered the body. And therefore, that which you hear, they can see. They are bonded with it much deeper because it's a spiritual moment for the Jew. Therefore, they connected with that which to the sound, just like you see. When you see, it's beyond doubt. That's Rabbi Akiva. What was usually seen, physical entities, our material world, was then only heard. It was an entity that is distant, as it were, could be conceived if only abstractly. Says Rabbi, and that what you usually see. What do you usually see? The physical object. Because the body and soul, the humanity, the being of a Jew became a much more refined spiritual entity, they related to the physicality of the universe around them in a far distant way, just like usually hearing is. And therefore they saw what you usually see, they heard. What do you mean they heard? It's a far distant, very shaky relationship with, because they become a spiritual entity. That's Rabbi Akiva. On this basis, did everybody understand? Ali? On this basis,
The stories.
it can also be understood that the miracle of seeing what is usually heard was not an external matter, intrinsically unrelated to the revelation of the given Torah, but was an integral element of that revelation. According to Rabbi Akiva, it wasn't a miracle of a show-off. It was part and parcel of what the Torah given to the Jewish people is defined. Says the Rebbe, at the giving of the Torah, the Jews experienced the revelation of God's very essence. God began the Ten Commandments stating, Anochi Havaya Elokecha, I am God, you Lord. Chassidut interprets that statement to mean Anochi, God's essence of God. I am, that transcends all being, and which cannot be alluded to by any letter or even any point of letter, descends to and become manifested through Havaya, the name of God so lofty that it was not made known to the patriarchs, and enclosed itself within every member of the Jewish people, becoming Elokecha, your strength and your vitality. Says Rabbi, that's the Kabbalistic interpretation of the first line of the Ten Commandments. Anochi, I am, Hashem, Havaya, Elokecha, your Lord, that took you out of Egypt. There are three names of God. Anochi referring to God without a name. I am, my essence. Havaya is a name of God that transcends nature. Everybody heard that here before. Elokecha, Elokim, if you convert Elokim to numbers, it's 86. Nature is also 86. Hateva is 86. So Elokim is God's name related to creation. If you look in the creation of the universe, is always Elokim. The first time Havaya appears is on Shabbat when God rested. Bereshit bara Elokim, Vayomer Elokim yehi or, Vayas Elokim et hashamayim. All Elokim, 7 times 7, 40 times, 42 times, because it's all natural. It's all about nature. 42 times it's mentioned the word Elokim in the 6 days of creation. I said 42, so it's 49. I'm sorry.
So Rabbi, in essence,
Maybe it's 6 times 7. I don't know. We'll have to count.
so if you think about this, of nature being transformed, the people became like angels.
Of course. By the way, it's in the Medrash. But here is the rabbi is going from under and explaining you why. It wasn't just as a show off or as a gift. It's an intrinsic part of what the revelation, that's what Rabbi said. What God wanted is to reveal himself and connect to Jewish people in a way that he even did not do to the patriarchs. Because they knew the Torah. God gave it to them already. Adam knew received the Torah. He gave it to Abraham to Yitzchak and Yaakov. And Yaakov gave it to Levi, to Yosef, Levi, etc. and went on to Moshe. But what God did was, he says, Anochi, my essence, Havaya, the name that is not revealed to the Jewish people, Elokecha, become connected to you in an intrinsic part of your life. That's the Ten Commandments. In other words, God takes the most spiritual aspect and makes us a spiritual entities that we can connect to God on that level. And therefore, physicality becomes a distant relationship. So that what you see, you hear now. In other words, it's not engraved in your brains or in your body as much as it was the hearing. Says the Rebbe, I want to move on to the. So says the Rebbe, what God did in the Ten Commandments is when he came down. What do you mean he came down Mount Sinai? God is everyone. Came down meaning he revealed himself to us in our physical body, elevating us to a state of spirituality overtaking the physical. And God changed nature that our body, physical body, can connect to spiritually deeper than we can connect to materialism, to physical. So far, so good. The Rebbe says he's going to give us an example about two litigants who come to court. You have three entities. You have the litigant itself, you have the witness, and you have the judge. Each one sees the story differently. Each one perceives what happened differently. The Rebbe goes on to the three details. We don't have the time. I want to go to the argument between Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiva. The purpose of the giving of the Torah, page 283. 7. On this basis, it is necessary to consider the opinion of Rabbi Ishmael. How does the fact that the Jews saw what is usually seen and heard what is usually heard, similarly the prevailing pattern within the natural order, represent an elevated state? And how was that an appropriate backdrop for the giving of the Torah, the quintessential state of holiness or loftiness? Says the Rebbe, okay, now we understand Rabbi Akiva's viewpoint. But Rabbi Ishmael says they saw what you see, they heard what you hear. What's the big deal? Why the Torah has to mention that? That's natural. People see what they see and they hear what they hear. In resolution, it can be explained that the new development brought about by the giving of the Torah is reflected by the verse, God descended on Mount Sinai. In the words of the Medrash, at that time, and from that time onward, the highest realms would descend to the lower realms, and God says, I will begin. That is, God himself initiated the process of drawing down godliness into the lower realms, into our material world, and more specifically into our world as it remains within its natural framework. The ultimate goal is that notwithstanding the materiality of the world, through the Torah here in this world, the Jews will be able to perceive the giver of the Torah, that is, to relate to godliness. Says Rabbi Ishmael, here is we're going to read in a moment. In other words, according to Rabbi Ishmael, what happened was God came down, and God says, no miracles. I'm not going to change nature. You're going to have to fight for a job. You're going to have to fight when you get married. You're going to have to fight with your children. There is going to be boundaries to skip over. There is going to be challenges. There are going to be difficulties. And you will find God in every part of the nature. In other words, God did not elevate the Jewish people like Rabbi Akiva. God kept them the way they are. And with their boundaries and the physical limitations, they should find God in there. Accordingly, Rabbi Ishmael maintains that at the time of the giving of the Torah, the Jews remained within the natural framework that governed our world. Nevertheless, within that framework, they experienced the ultimate spiritual peaks, even though they still saw what is usually seen and heard what is usually heard. At the giving of the Torah, their very sight and hearing was permeated by the truth of God that shone forth to the world so powerfully that they were brought to a complete state of self-nullification, bitul. They trembled and stood from afar, and as we'll discuss soon. So the Rabbi Ishmael disagree with Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Ishmael, now we all understand yes and no, that's what we're going to get to. But the difference between Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiva now, Rabbi Ishmael says it's all natural. God wanted to walk within the natural rules of nature, and therefore they got to the highest point of their existence, but that highest point is within the boundaries of nature. Therefore, they connected to the physicality deeper than the spirituality, but still they have to bring God into it. The rabbi explains the reasons Rabbi Akiva saw breaking of nature, meaning when God came down, he changed and refined the Jew. Rabbi Ishmael, on the other hand, maintained that the Jew remained the same. Because Rabbi Ishmael was the high priest, Rabbi Akiva was a son of converts, and each one saw the relationship with God in a different eye. We're not going to discuss it. But the rabbi, now, I think, now let me summarize the differences of opinion. According to Rabbi Akiva, once you become a spiritual entity and you connect to spirituality deeper than you connect to physicality, it doesn't matter what mitzvah God gives you. There is a general overpowering of serving God. And therefore God says, eat chocolate, yes. Don't drink wine, yes. Whatever you say, I'll say yes. Rabbi Akiva maintained that the physical boundaries are broken, right? And God came down and made them a more refined spiritual entity. If it's a more refined spiritual entity, then they respond to positive or negative precepts equally the same. Said yes, 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 yes. It's called total bitul bamtsiut, totally nullified. I am a vehicle. So imagine you're a chariot and you have horses, and the rider tells the horses turn right, or the rider tells the horses make a circle. The chariot, the wagon will go around. It doesn't matter if it goes backwards to Tel Aviv or it goes to Jerusalem, it's the same. That's why Rabbi Akiva maintained that they all said yes to all of the 10 commandments. Rabbi Ishmael, on the other hand, says, no, there is a physical boundaries. I have my lusts. I have my desires. I hate this type of chocolate. I love this type of sugary treat. And therefore, when God says, don't steal, this is okay, we won't. And God says, honor your father and mother. Okay, we will do it. Because the physical framework was intact, all fully the way they are. And they have a brains, they have a heart. I desire something, I hate something else, and I needed to be subservient to God. How do we do that? By saying yes to the positive and by saying no to the negative. Thus, we see how the Rebbe combined those two opinions and both arguments, perceiving the same, based on the same underlying understanding of what the Torah achieved. So according to Rabbi Akiva, what God did was perform a miracle, change nature, make the Jew a much more spiritual entity, and therefore he says yes to everything. According to Rabbi Ishmael, the human being it remained the exact same. They see what they see and they hear what they hear. Even though God overpowered the Jewish people, the miracle was they did not lose the physical boundaries. And therefore, when God says, do something, they said, okay, we'll do. Don't do something, okay, we won't do it. In other words, they had to respond accordingly. And that will conclude. And the rabbi goes on, now we can see a Rashi taking one way. In one area, Rashi follows Rabbi Ishmael, another area, Rashi follows Rabbi Akiva, which requires understanding. This is a very, very long discussion, but at least we have the two opinions now explained. Now we can understand the word Vaydaber Elokim et kol hadvarim ha'ele leimor. God spoke all these words leimor, saying here is different, saying that the Jewish people had to respond back to God. According to Rabbi Ishmael, they said yes to positive and no to negative. According to Rabbi Akiva, they said yes to everything. Thank you very much. We'll meet again next week. Yes, sure.
Are they 10 commandments?